the person who did really well in the debates was Nikki Haley, but she can't win because she's an establishment Republican running in a year where you had to be a populist. So, I mean, I didn't even mention the assassination attempts, which in most political years would be enough to guarantee you a win in and of themselves. So, I mean, there's a lot of that happened. I don't know that he's just lucky, or if that, how much of that was, political strategy, but there's a whole lot that went into that.
I just don't think that the current media environment is not conducive to anything you're saying. I think that Hillary Clinton, maybe not Hillary, maybe though. I think Hillary Clinton could have won in 2008 and in 2012. I don't think Barack Obama running as a first-time candidate, he would not win in 2024. Absolutely not. Because in 2016, Donald Trump's entry point into politics was that Barack Obama was born in Kenya. And I think in 2024, I think that would have carried much further. He didn't have the same sycophantic cultish hold over him, but I think that in 2024, I don't think a candidate like Barack Obama would even have Barack Hussein Obama would even have a chance of appearing on the political field. I think it would be so quickly and immediately buried by the Republican media apparatus.
No, it would have had to have been a populist version of, the same political talent, but a populist, not an internationalist, which is, unfortunately, that was just kind of like a populist year. That seemed to be what was moving the needle for people, which I think is, in some ways, the heart of the, what does the left do about the socialist, tanky, populist wing on the left, side of the spectrum debate, because, that was votes that were needed in 2024. That seemed to be what was animating people.
Well, I mean, everybody got less votes. I don't think they needed that. I think that they just lost the center left more than anything else, because everybody lost votes there. But I think inflation, everything hurt. But I don't know.
I think it matters. I mean, that I was amongst those votes they lost, so that certainly mattered to me. But we talked endlessly about that in our first conversations.
How could you? The socialist wing of the party is like nobody in the government. Wait, it was kids at college what lost you the vote?
No. I was saying there's two separate issues, and maybe I misspoke or conflated them. One issue is, how do you activate the left wing of the party in a way that's productive, which is a tough thing to do because the left wing of the party is totally useless. The second point, which is unrelated, is that I'm a center-left voter, and they lost my vote. So I was saying that I tend to agree with your prescription about the center being lost because that's my vote. I don't know I don't have numbers to support that, but I feel it emotionally because that's where I was.
Sure, but I'm saying the center left is lost because of the right wing media apparatus, right? I wouldn't consider you. I wouldn't consider you a center left voter at all. You're like a mega apologist is what I would consider you for voting. Because there's no world where if you take a totality of center left beliefs and I ask you between Trump or Kamala, I wouldn't be able to finish the sentence. But you're like, obviously, I would vote for basically almost anybody over Trump. And if that's like if you even pause to think there, you're not center left in any world. There's no way that you're a center left. You're a center right at best, right? If not.
Well, I mean, we can quibble about whether I occupy center left and center right, and my own personal political evolution is interesting to me, but maybe not your viewers. I think the more important point is that for 20 some odd years, I was a reliable left vote, right? Like, I was voting left starting, I think I was too young in 2000, but like past 2000, I've been a reliable left vote. And whether you agree or disagree with the things that bothered me about the Harris candidacy and the Biden administration, those were things that were sufficient to me to not want to vote for them, even though I thought Trump was disqualified. Like, in my mind, he should not have been president. So I said, I'm going to sit this one out because I don't think that I want either of them to be president.
Yeah, but one of them is going to be president. So for sitting it out, it's a tacit endorsement of whoever ends up winning, right?
Well, I think that that's how our system works. So you can choose to vote. You can choose to vote for a third party candidate. You can choose not to vote.
Sure, but also it wasn't just sitting it out. You had a preference. You had a preference for Trump winning, right?
I didn't want either of them to win.
But you preferred Trump over her because affirmative action was the single illuminating thing.
In a gun to my head scenario, yeah, I preferred him because I thought that she was not going to do anything useful about the border. I thought she was going to take the opportunity to appoint Supreme Court justices I would disagree with because of affirmative action, because of what I consider to be woke overreach, and we can put that in that bucket if that makes you feel better about it. There were a number of issues where I thought that she was going. Oh, sorry.
Sure.
To cover up Biden's health, which we talked about.
So I think all of that is fine. I think it's fair. You're just a conservative, though, right? You wanted strong border, crazy deportation shit. You dramatically opposed affirmative action. You support this court, which is insane. The court is insane. So you're just like a conservative. It's a conservative position, right?
I'm an originalist, so of course I like an originalist court. That's not.
That might be fine that you're an originalist and you like an originalist court. This is not an originalist court, though, so that has nothing to do with this Supreme Court.
They absolutely are an originalist court.
How? In what sense?
I mean. We did a whole debate on well, actually we didn't do originalism. We did the pardons. No, we did immunity. Sorry, we did immunity.
In what world where we've invented criminal immunity for the president is this an originalist court? There's a whole new wholesale cloth fabrication of categories for presidential actions to prevent the president from being convicted of a crime.
I think this is a misstatement of. Actually, it's just a misstatement. It doesn't work in a number of ways. I think the first question that you ask when you ask an originalist framework is, A, can we resolve this? Like, can we know what was meant by various provisions? And they did look at the structure of the Constitution, and as we went through, and people can look at this, we talked about it for hours, they looked at the meaning of those and then asked, what does that mean for the structure of the Constitution? There's nothing about that that's inherently unoriginalist. It's exactly the sort of analysis that you would look towards. Originalism is not as shallow an inquiry as I think you're making it out to be.
My understanding is that back in the 1700s, there were crimes and criminal things, and if you wanted the president to be immune from criminal things, you would probably just write it down. There is absolutely nothing in the founding documents. There's absolutely nothing written at the time from any of the founding fathers. There's a reason why Roberts and the rest of the clowns on the bench relied on Nixon v. Fitzgerald to try to fabricate this concept of criminal immunity from a civil immunity case, where the judges on that case said that there would obviously be no criminal protections. There's no way that you can say there's an originalist reading of any part of the Constitution that would imply the president of the United States, founded in a country revolting against a king, would want to make the president of the United States immune against crime with wholly new fabricated buckets of actions.
So if we're going to do this again, first,
sorry, okay.
There is when you're doing an originalist analysis, there are going to be areas where you don't get the cleanest original meaning, right? And the reason is because there are things that are just very different. Like, for example, there was no federal police force who would have been charging the president with crimes at the time of ratification. So there's just some big structural differences. So what they did is they looked at the structure of the Constitution and looked at what that implies. What is the meaning of that? So I know we've gone through this already, so in case I'm boring you, I'm sorry. You look at the pardon power, for example, and you ask, well, could Congress criminalize the president's use of the pardon power? The answer is no, they couldn't, because it's a core and exclusive power.
Hold on, wait, I'm so sorry. Hold on, I just have to ask. You said there was no concept of a federal police?
At the time of ratification?
What was the point of the federal government? How would the executive have enforced any power from the Congress without any kind of federal enforcement?
The federal government was much, much smaller at the time of ratification.
I'm asking, if the Congress passes a law, you're telling me that effectively the executive branch had no teeth? I thought that all we heard in that immunity case was a vigorous executive. How do we have a vigorous executive with no police or ability to enforce laws?
The FBI didn't exist, right?
I didn't say the FBI is not the only thing, right?
Yeah, I've not done a survey of every agency or actor in the federal system at that time. I am unaware, and if anyone in chat knows and could point me to something that'd be helpful, but I am unaware of any equivalency of the FBI or the modern DOJ in that era. I think that at that point, the president's powers domestically were much, much smaller than they are today. They were it would be the barest fraction of what they are today.
Yeah, but how would the feds have enforced literally anything if they had no? What was the enforcement mechanism for the executive?
I'm not positive actually, but most of the domestic law was very, very minor. For example, back then interstate commerce meant interstate commerce, so you couldn't pass a law that affected the economy of a state that was just inside the state. So like they could say if there's a federal law that says, okay, you can't require a passport or documents to travel between states, but they couldn't, for example, pass a law that says, you can't grow this much corn. Like it had to, it was like the federal government had very limited domestic powers for time gratification. It was only later when the Commerce Clause got extended that the federal government started to have the power to really control most state policy.
Okay, even if I grant that the U.S. Marshals were founded in 1789, okay, obviously there's going to be some form of federal enforcement but even ignoring, no, I wouldn't ignore that. Even if you want to say this, in what part does that imply?
What were Marshals doing in 1789?
I'm forcing something federally, I guess.
Okay, we can look it up later.
We could be talking about like state, I guess, prosecution or whatever as well, though. Like states could investigate the president. Like, what part of the founding of this country would ever give anybody the implication or the idea that the president of the United States was supposed to be immune from any kind of criminal prosecution?
The Constitution does not give Congress the power to criminalize the president's use of the pardon. You would agree with that? It's a core and exclusive power of the president, right? Like, Congress could not pass a law that says the president cannot issue a pardon.
I would agree with that, yes. Yes.
And Congress could not pass a law that says if the president does issue a pardon, we can prosecute him.
If that was simply the text, yes, but...
Yeah, and in fact, and this is the point that the court was making when they ruled on immunity, Congress can't pass a law that implicates the pardon power because the pardon power is outside their jurisdiction. For example, they can't pass a law that says there is no federal business done on Wednesdays, and if federal business is done on Wednesdays, we can charge you with a crime. And if the president does a pardon on Wednesdays, they can't charge him with the crime because his pardon power is outside of their jurisdiction. They have limited authority, and that is not within their authority.
That's fine that it's not within their authority, but there are plenty of things that can be outside of the authority that can still implicate you in other crimes. For instance, I can say, I hate you and I wish I could kill you, and that wouldn't be a crime. But if I said that, and then I made a plan with a person to do it, and then I went to a store and I buy something, and I start driving to your house, I can be implicated in the conspiracy to murder. Now, it's not a crime for me to go to a store and buy a chainsaw. It's not a crime for me to talk about wanting to kill you. But if I start doing these things in conjunction with other things, I can be charged with a criminal conspiracy to commit a crime. But that doesn't, so the pardon, we're not talking about Congress criminalizing the actions themselves, but rather criminalizing illegal conduct. Rather than, you're trying to make this argument that we're saying that well, the immunity thing was just a good faith interpretation of the Constitution to protect the president's core powers. But that's not true. The immunity ruling was actually the way for the president to extend his core powers in a way that makes him immune from crime. Rather than saying we shouldn't make it illegal for the president to pardon people, we've said that we shouldn't make it illegal for the president to murder somebody as long as it's done in conjunction with the pardon power. And there is absolutely nothing in the founding doctrine of this country, which is why this court relied so heavily on that Fitzgerald case in order to make this argument. There was no founding father implication of criminal immunity for the president. There was no early congressional support for this concept anywhere.
The key case I'm relying on is not Nixon, it's Youngstown Steel. But and Youngstown Steel was the case that announced this analysis, which is that when you're asking whether the president has authority to do something, you ask whether he's doing something that's within his core and exclusive powers, whether he's doing something that is concurrent with Congress, and if it's concurrent with Congress, whether he has their approval or disapproval. So
Youngstown was still related to civil stuff, though. None of this implied at any point implied criminal immunity ever. Nobody has this in the whole of the United States, like foreign ambassadors.
The framework that the court applied, and then, as I think you've conceded, though you can tell me if I'm misinterpreting what you just said, the court reasoned, looking at things like the pardon power, that there are areas where the president has core and exclusive power, meaning Congress cannot criminalize it, meaning he must be immune, because Congress does not have the power to criminalize the thing that he is doing.
I don't need the Congress to tell me that. That's obvious and plain in the text and in what the president is being allotted. The Congress couldn't charge him with a crime for going to war, obviously.
Okay, so then you agree there are areas of immunity. So then, since there are